I remember that.
Hang on a second. Okay. Okay.
Okay, I remember that gasoline was rationed, canned goods, meat and sugar, candy and cigarettes. We had to have food stamps in order to get some canned goods and some sugar and meat. My mother, which would be your great-grandmother, worked at Chrysler during World War II. She had a B card for gasoline, which gave her more gasoline because she was working in working at Chrysler, and they were building tanks and bullets. We used to take our wagons around and we'd gather everything aluminum up and turn it in for the war effort, because they recycled all that and used that material. Tires. You couldn't hardly buy a rubber tire anyplace because they were used with the war effort. And women couldn't get nylon hose because of World War II. That was in Europe and in the Pacific. We were sent out when we were kids in school. We rolled bandages for the Red Cross, and then we were taken by school buses down into the river bottoms where we picked milkweed pods and put them in big grass sacks, and that was used to make life preservers. We'd be out of school maybe 1-2 days a week or something sometimes, collecting the milkweed pods. Everybody was knitting. They were knitting sweaters and socks and hats for the servicemen. That was through the Red Cross. But as kids, mostly the young people that were my age, all we did was collect aluminum and tin and pick milkweed pods and roll bandages. I can remember right off the top of my head.
Do you remember the Pearl Harbor attack?
Yes. I remember the attack on Pearl Harbor as though it happened yesterday. It was December 7th, 1941. And I was in the dining room at my Uncle Ivan's home. We were listening to the radio when they broke in and said that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And everybody was so torn up, and we were all scared to death because we knew more members of our family would have to go to war. But that was a Sunday, and we had gathered for a family dinner, and then we were all listening to the radio when that happened. How did I feel about it?
Yeah.
It scared me, and though I was only about 8 years old, I guess, I remember crying, because at that point in time then they were worried about the west coast of the United States, afraid that the Japanese would attack there. I think that's why as a child I was scared. But I'll always remember that day as long as I live.
You lived on the west coast. Did you... Wait.
But I remember the internment of the Japanese Americans because they were afraid they would sympathize with the mother country and maybe do things like sabotage to our war effort. And whether it was necessary or not, I don't know, because there was a group of Japanese Americans that went into the Army, and they made up, I believe it was one platoon, and they went and fought their mother country. It was disgusting to know the way those American people were treated because they were Japanese Americans, and I don't think that should have ever happened. But then you can go back as far as World War I. The German Americans in this country were badly treated, because of the war with Germany, even back in World War I. But did I consider it necessary? I was too young to realize then whether it was necessary or not, but I can tell you that today I don't think it was necessary, and I don't feel that they should have been treated the way they were, particularly when they all went to war and fought their own people. Right here in Newburgh.
Did you move?
No, because my mother stayed in Evansville while she worked in the war plant, because she was working sometimes 15 and 20 hours a day because she was in payroll, trying to keep payroll going. And she lived, I didn't move, but she moved into Evansville and lived with her sister while she had to do that work, but I didn't move.
Okay.
No, I wasn't in war work. I was too young.
What do you remember about
war rationing and how the rationing stamps and what things were rationed? I told you that back up here.
Okay. What do you remember about entertainment and fun, if any, during the war?
Well, there was a USO in Evansville during the war because of Camp Breckinridge in Kentucky. I was too young to go to the USO, but I remember seeing the military people from Camp Breckinridge going there, and there was a lot of things going on that I did participate in, such as skating at the skating rinks. That was a great big thing, and fun. Most of the time, everybody concentrated on the war effort, the fact that boys were dying and knew they weren't be coming back, and that was always on their mind. So yes, maybe you had a good time for a while, but your mind always went back to the fact that there were boys overseas that were dying for us that were at home. And our parents went out of their way to make us aware of the fact that we were here living in the comfort of the United States. We had maybe some hard times because of rationing and that sort of thing, but they went out of their way to make us realize what those boys were doing for us. They were giving their lives to keep us safe.
What do you remember about transportation?
Well, transportation, they tried to get everybody to carpool back then, like they did even here a few years ago during the gasoline crunch, when everybody was lined up and stuff trying to get gasoline. Back then, everybody did carpool. They would help with the gasoline and using their gas stamps, and there would be carloads of people that would go from here to Evansville to work, and on occasion the ENOV and ES&N bus line would even send a bus between Newburgh and Boonville around to catch people that needed to go into town, because I think the ration book A, I don't know how many gallons a month that gave you, but it was very little.
Do you remember the dropping of the atomic bomb?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Was it different than Pearl Harbor, though?
Yes. The first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. And
Hiroshima, is that same as Hiroshima?
yes.
So pronounced different?
Yes, same thing. Back then we didn't have the televisions we have now, but when you went to the show, before the show started, they always had the news. And I remember Pathé News in the old Lowe's Victory Theater. That was one of the things I guess I'll never forget, was the pictures that were taken after the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima, if you want to call it that. It was hideous. It was No, it was horrendous. It was horrible. The way the children were so badly burned, and people with flesh, it showed people that their flesh was just rolling up on them from radiation. And it really made you think. But then when you stop to think about what had been done to our boys that fought in the Pacific, the torture and the hideous things that happened to them, sometimes you felt like that was just punishment. However, I don't believe that you can punish the entire country of people for the things that only a part of them do. But I realize that more now as an adult than I did as a kid. When I was a kid, I thought, you're getting what you deserve. But the next bomb, there was 2 bombs dropped, but I can't remember whether. Okay, the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki with the same injuries, the same amount of people killed, and it was just as horrendous as the first one. Of course, after that, the Japanese surrendered, and the surrender was signed aboard the USS Missouri with Harry S. Truman there and General Douglas MacArthur. I can't recall the other people involved, but I remember the surrender quite well. Well, it's just like I said. At the time, I thought, ha, you're getting what you deserve, because we'd always been told of the tortures that had gone on by the Japanese to our servicemen. And if you're a child, you think, well, goody, goody, goody. And the Bible says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but that's not meant to be taken, I think, in that context. And as I said, you shouldn't punish an entire country of people for what only a few do, because you know there were a lot of people in those countries, cities rather, that were innocent and would have never done any harm. So it ended the war, and it saved a lot of American lives. And I'll not say any more. He was and Skinny Wainwright. Skinny Wainwright was a part of the Bataan Death March. Back then, we were all of us were so into the officers who were commanding the forces in the Pacific. I mean, like I remember General Jimmy Doolittle. He was a bomber pilot, and Skinny Wainwright, General Skinny Wainwright, he was an officer. And used to be able, like you have baseball cards now, used to be cards you could get back then that had all these generals and all these officers' pictures on them and told what they had done. And I mean, back then, they were just as much celebrities as your baseball players are today. And we looked to our military for our heroes back during World War II. But I can remember so well being taken loading up on school buses, and they'd take us down in the river bottoms to pick milkweed pods, and it would be muddy and wet. It was a dirty, wet job. You had to get all the milkweeds were pods about, I guess about that long, and they were about that big around. They looked a whole lot like an okra. You know what an okra looks like, okay? They looked a whole lot like an okra, and they would dry. When they were dry, they were real brown, and the outside would break off, and inside looked like silk, silk threads, just full of silk threads in there, and that's what they used to put into the life preservers.
How many else would it take?
I don't have any idea. I would imagine it took millions of pounds but wasn't just our school doing it. There were schools all over the United States doing that, sending kids out to pick the milkweed pods. And the Red Cross taught us to roll those bandages. I'll never forget that. My mother, I don't know how many sweaters she made, and socks and caps, scarves. Everybody did their part. And even the kids, out with their wagons, picking up people's aluminum pans and tin cans and stomping them to flatten them out so that you could put them a whole bunch in a pack. That's how about. Sometimes I could come up a bit more, but that's all I can remember. Well, that enough to get you an A?
Probably.
The assignment has a value of 100. Extra credit can be earned by taping the interview and bringing in items shared with you by the person being interviewed. I might just come up a bit more, but that's all I can remember. Well, that enough to get you an A?
Probably.